High above the cheerful, snowflake-dusted valley of Whoville, there sat a jagged, purple-shadowed peak known as Mount Crumpet. And inside a cave, cold and damp, lived the Grinch. He was a creature of sour lemons and vinegar thoughts. While the Whos below were bustling about, hanging mistletoe and polishing their bink minkas, the Grinch stood at the edge of his ledge, vibrating with a deep emerald green resentment. "They're hanging their stockings," he snarled with a sneer. "Tomorrow is Christmas. It's practically here." He hated the Christmas season. Don't ask why. No one quite knew the reason. It could be his shoes were too tight, or his head wasn't screwed on just right. But the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. He watched through his long-range Who-scope as the citizens of Whoville marched hand in hand. He could almost smell the Who pudding and hear the clatter of the Who roast beast platters. For 53 years he had put up with it. He hated the noise of the drums and the trumpets and the squeals of the children. He pressed his hands against his ears, his yellow eyes glowing like dying coals. "I must stop this Christmas from coming," he hissed. But how? Then a slow, crooked grin spread across his face. A terrible, wonderful, awful idea took root in his mind.
The Grinch chuckled in his throat, a sound like dry leaves skittering over pavement. "I know just what to do." He raided his closet, pulling out old red curtains and a dusty sewing kit. If he was going to stop Christmas, he had to go undercover. He had to become the very thing they loved most. He had to become Santa Claus. With a needle that looked like a bird's beak, he began to sew. He pricked his finger, yow, and hopped around the cave on one foot, cursing the holiday spirit even more. He fashioned a coat that was a bit too tight in the armpits and a hat with a pom-pom that looked more like a wilted onion. He looked in his cracked mirror and let out a cackle that shook the stalactites from the ceiling. "With this coat and this hat, I look just like Saint Nick." But he needed a reindeer. He looked around his cave, but since reindeer are scarce in the high mountain peaks, he looked at his dog, Max. Max was a small, scrap metal-colored dog with big, soulful eyes that always seemed to be apologizing for something. The Grinch took a giant, heavy elk horn he'd found in the trash years ago and tied it to the top of Max's head with a thick piece of red twine. Poor Max's head slumped to the floor under the weight. "Perfect!" the Grinch shouted. "A reindeer for my sleigh!"
Sleigh has a reindeer.
The Grinch dragged an old, rickety wooden sleigh out from the back of his cave. It creaked and groaned like a haunted house. He piled it high with empty burlap sacks that were meant to be filled with the joy of an entire village. "Load up, Max," he commanded. Max, balancing the heavy horn, hopped into the front harness with a whimper. The Grinch climbed into the driver's seat and cracked a whip made of old vines. "Giddy up!" And the sleigh started down toward the homes where the Whos lay a snooze. The descent was a chaotic blur of snow and ice. They fishtailed around Widow's Peak and skipped over frozen Pebble Falls. Max's ears flew back in the wind, and the Grinch's red hat nearly flew off his green head. The lights of Whoville grew closer and closer, warm, inviting glows against the deep blue of the midnight snow. Every window was dark. Every Who was dreaming of sugar Whos and plum tarts. The Grinch slowed the sleigh as they reached the edge of the first town square. He stepped out onto the soft, powdery snow, his boots making no sound at all. He looked at the first little house on the end of the lane. "First stop," he whispered, his voice a jagged edge. "The House of the Whos."
The Grinch slid down the chimney, a tight squeeze for a man of his unique proportions. He landed in the fireplace with a soft thump, puffing out a cloud of soot. He looked around the living room. It was disgusting. It was decorated with tinsel, lights, and, the worst of all, presents. He moved like a shadow, or a snake, slithering across the floor. He didn't just take the big boxes, he took the jing-tinglers and the flu-flubers. He went to the kitchen and cleaned out the icebox. He took the Who pudding, he took the Who hash, he even took the last can of Who mousse. He stuffed them all into his giant bags with a frantic, greedy energy. He turned to the Christmas tree glowing in the corner. He started to shove it up the chimney, branch by prickly branch. He took the stockings from the mantel, leaving nothing but hooks and some wire. The room was becoming bare, cold, and gray, just the way he liked it. He reached for the very last ornament, a glass star, when he heard a sound that made his heart skip a beat. It was a soft, cooing sound, like a dove in the rafters. He froze, his hand trembling on the glass.
He turned around slowly, and there she was, Cindy Lou who was no more than 2. She had been woken by the sound of the tree needles scraping against the stone. She stood there in her nightgown, her eyes wide and innocent, holding a battered cup of water. "Santa Claus?" she whispered. "Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why?" The Grinch's mind whirred. He was a liar, and he was a good one. He coughed a small fake cough and knelt down, trying to make his face look like a friendly grandpa instead of a mountain monster. "Why, my sweet little tot," the Grinch faked, "there's a light on this tree that won't light on one side, so I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, then I'll bring it back here." Cindy Lou looked at him, searching his yellow eyes. The Grinch held his breath. Finally, she nodded, satisfied by the lie. He patted her on the head, gave her a small cookie he had missed in the kitchen, and sent her back to bed with a gentle nudge. As soon as her bedroom door clicked shut, the Grinch's smile vanished. He stuffed the rest of the tree up the chimney, grabbed the logs for the fire, and climbed out, leaving the house completely empty.
It was nearly dawn. The Grinch had visited every house. He had emptied every cupboard, stripped every mantle, and hushed every Who whistle. His sleigh was now a mountain itself, piled 100 feet high with bicycles, roller skates, drums, checkerboards, tricycles, and popcorn. It was heavy, so heavy that Max's little paws were sinking deep into the crusty snow as they began the long, agonizing climb back up Mount Crumpet. "Push, Max! Pull, Max!" the Grinch bellowed. He was straining against the back of the sleigh, his green muscles bulging. He wanted to be at the very top when the sun came up. He wanted to hear the sound of the Who's waking up to find nothing. No gifts, no feast, no Christmas. They reached the peak, 3,000 feet up. The wind howled, whipping the Grinch's red coat. He stood at the very edge of the precipice, the sleigh teetering precariously over the drop. "Now," he grinned, "I'll dump it. I'll dump the whole lot into the abyss." They're waking up now. They're finding out that no Christmas is coming. They'll all start crying boo-hoo in a minute. He cupped his hand to his ear and leaned down toward the valley, waiting for the sound of sorrow.
The sun began to peek over the edge of the horizon, turning the snow from blue to a soft golden pink. And then it started. A sound. It wasn't a cry. It wasn't a sob. It was a low hum that grew into a melody. The Grinch narrowed his eyes. What is that? The sound grew louder and clearer. It was singing. All the Whos, the tall and the small, were standing together in the center of town. They had no presents. They had no tree. They had no Who roast beast, but they were singing, hand in hand, a song of joy that echoed off the mountain walls. The Grinch stood frozen, his mouth hung open. It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. He puzzled and puzzled until his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. The tight, cold feeling in his chest snapped. A warmth flooded through him that he had never felt. But then he gasped. The sleigh, it was slipping.
The sleigh began to slide toward the edge of the cliff. "No!" the Grinch screamed. With the strength of 10 Grinches plus 2, he lunged forward. He grabbed the back runner just as the sleigh tipped. His boots skidded on the ice. Max barked and pulled at the front, and with a mighty, heart-filled heave, the Grinch yanked the entire holiday back from the brink of destruction. He didn't waste a second. He hopped on top of the pile and let out a hoot of joy. "Hang on, Max! We're going back!" The sleigh rocketed down the mountain, not as a thief in the night, but as a messenger of the morning. He whistled and cheered as he rode into the town square. The Whos looked up in surprise as the green man in the tattered red suit began throwing packages and trees back to their rightful owners. He apologized to Cindy Lou, he gave Max a giant bone, and then came the greatest moment of all. A long table was set in the center of the square, covered in a white cloth. The Whos invited him to sit. The Grinch, with a humble smile and a heart full of light, took the carving knife. He looked at the Who roast beast, and he looked at his new friends, and he, the Grinch himself, carved the meat. Christmas hadn't been stopped, it had finally truly begun.